The 2025 NFL Draft is still a few weeks away. However, let's go ahead and do my top 10 defensive players of the 2025 NFL Draft. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. Now, before we actually get into my top 10, I do want to hand out 4 honorable mentions. These are players that I definitely did consider for my top 10. Ultimately, they just were outside of it just a tad bit for a number of different reasons. Guys like Micah Williams, Shamar Stewart, Walter Nolan, and Kenneth Grant were all considered for my top 10 defensive players, but ultimately, a couple issues here and there led them to be outside of my top 10. In case you guys want to know more reasons why they weren't in my top 10, you can ask in the comments and I'll make sure to respond to you. Moving to number 10, I have James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. Now, there have been some off the field issues that have recently kind of came to notice for a lot of NFL teams, which potentially could have him dropping in the NFL draft. But in terms of the pure talent that is within the player, I think James Pierce Jr. is a hell of a player. James Pierce Jr. had 9.5 sacks in 2023, which led the SEC. Then he also had a very productive season in 2024. This is somebody who has great size, good overall agility, speed. His speed rush is maybe one of the best in this year's draft class. What does fall him down a little bit is I don't think he's really the bendy athlete that a lot of people think he is. When you look at guys like Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, like those upper echelon pass rushers, those are guys that have elite bend around the corner. So when they are producing or performing a pass rush move that involves them having to get around the corner, they have the bend necessary to do so. Whereas for James Pierce Jr., I don't quite think you're going to be able to get that out of him. Now, I do think he's a very good athlete that can definitely develop that, but when it comes to his bend, it's definitely not his strength. But again, this guy is a freak athlete that can easily run somewhere within the 4.4s, potentially 4.5s. He's silky smooth. I think his pass rushing technique, when it gets to the NFL, will be refined. And if he can gain maybe an additional 8 to 10 pounds, I think this guy is going to be a really solid pass rusher for whatever team does take him. Again, it just kind of comes down to, can he find that extra little bit of bend around the corner that could potentially move him from being a good pass rusher to a really good pass rusher at the NFL level. Moving to number 9, I got Malachi Starks of the Georgia Bulldogs. I think Malachi Starks is one of the most fun players to watch in this year's draft class. Now, I would say Malachi's 2023 season was a little bit better than his 2024 season, and honestly, there's a couple other players that you could say a lot of the similar things about. Guys like James Pierce Jr. and somebody else we'll talk about here in a little bit. You can kind of say the same story, but man, I think Malachi Starks is just one of those versatile pieces that you can plug and play wherever you really need him to play. He can play strong safety, where I think he could be an excellent playmaker who is also pretty decent tackler. Or if you want to play him more out at free safety, I think he'll make a ton of plays for you. Hell, I even think if worst case scenario he doesn't work out at safety, which I don't think he will, I think he will easily work out at safety. I kind of think you could probably play him as more of like a slot / nickel corner and have him line up against tight ends and slot receivers, and I think he'll have a lot of success. Malachi Starks is one of the few safeties in this draft class that I truly do find to be a playmaker, meaning when the ball is in the air, Malachi Starks is in the area, it feels like Malachi Starks is somehow, some way going to end up with the football, whether it's through a tip pass or whether it's through making an interception. Like, this guy is going to find a way to make the play, and I just think Malachi Starks is one of those dudes who will elevate any defense that he is on. 6'1", 205, he runs very well, he has good size, good speed, hip fluidity is very solid. I think Malachi Starks is the overall best package safety in this year's draft class. Again, I love his versatility, and I just think Malachi Starks is a heck of a player. Now, his 2024 tape wasn't as good as his 2023 tape, but I do think in some ways it was because the rest of the Georgia defense was a little bit younger than what they were in 2023, so that kind of did hurt Malachi Starks, but I still think Malachi Starks had a hell of a season. Moving over to number 8, Jalen Walker. Now, Jalen Walker is maybe the biggest question mark of this draft class, because a lot of people have Jalen Walker inside their top 10 overall players, whereas a lot of other people have Jalen Walker outside of their top like 25. And I think the big reason why is Jalen Walker is somebody that is going to need a ton of development in the NFL level. Like, the player that he is today will not be the same player that you see potentially 10 to 5 years down the line. Jalen Walker today is somebody who has some versatility, whether you want to play him at off-ball linebacker, you want to play him at outside linebacker, hell, if you want to stick him out to be an edge rusher, Jalen Walker could be all three of those, and I think he could excel at all three of those. Jalen Walker is arguably the biggest freak athlete in this year's draft class. He's got great size, good bend, good twitchiness. It's just that he's so raw as a pass rusher, which is where a lot of people think he'll end up, that makes him potentially not necessarily somebody somebody who you want to take super early because he needs a ton of development. Again, this is somebody who I see in a lot of people's top 10 in their mock drafts, but I've also seen some people not even take him in their top 10. I have usually considered taking him usually around pick 15 to 30, which I think is a little bit more where I would like to have him at. But again, I've heard a lot of buzz about Carolina potentially taking Jalen Walker, and well, it makes sense. Jalen Walker is, as I mentioned, one of the freakiest athletes in this year's draft class. I think he has the potential to be an excellent pass rusher if he develops a skill set and some pass rushing moves, which I think will benefit him greatly, as well as if he does become a pass rusher, probably putting on a little bit of weight might help him too. I think Jalen Walker is somebody who needs development, but I think he can learn on the job. I think more than likely he'll play a little bit of both outside linebacker, off-ball linebacker, and edge rusher. So I think it's going to be something where he's going to be learning on the job. And again, if Carolina does take him, I think it'd be a good spot for Jalen Walker because that's a team that's not going to be contending anytime soon. So he can legitimately spend the next 2 to 3 years developing and growing. And by the time hopefully the Carolina Panthers are ready to contend, Jalen Walker will be the guy they think he can be. So I actually don't dislike the idea of taking him in the top 10 if it's for Carolina. Moving on to number 7, and this might be the biggest riser. This was somebody who I just recently watched the film on, and I came away just blown away with this guy's tape and what he could be at the NFL level. Somebody who I have not been taking in first round of mock drafts, but that will definitely be changing. I got Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. Now, Jahad Campbell to me, kind of in a lot of ways very similar to Jalen Walker, but I just think he's a little bit more refined version of what Jalen Walker is, hence why I have him a little bit higher than Jalen Walker. But if you want to put Jalen Walker in front of him because of the ceiling, I do understand. Now, Jahad Campbell was, I believe, a 5-star, one of the best edge rushers in the nation coming out of high school, but because Alabama had so many good pass rushers, they moved him to off-ball linebacker, and well, he's done a good enough job at that position to have himself in conversations to be one of the better defensive players in the draft. A lot of people see some very similar things with Jalen Walker that they do with Jahad Campbell, where you can play him at off-ball linebacker and he'll find success, but you can also move this guy out to edge or outside linebacker, and he might have some potential versatility to play that position at a high level. Now, again, this is a lot of just projecting. We don't really have the tape, nor really do we have the statistics to back up the fact that Jahad Campbell could be a good pass rusher at the NFL level, but because we know he did it in high school, because we know he was excellent at it in high school, and because we know that he is an excellent off-ball linebacker, maybe there is a chance he does stick out at edge or outside linebacker. Now, the player that Jahad Campbell is honestly in a couple of ways kind of similar to Jalen Walker. He's a little bit bigger than Jalen Walker in terms of just overall frame. He runs silky smooth. As an off-ball linebacker, this guy could just shoot gaps and make some huge plays. In coverage, he leaves a little bit to be desired, but again, we're talking about a guy that's only played that position the past couple years, so it's going to be a work in progress. But I do think you've seen a couple times where Jahad Campbell will play very good and excellent coverage out there. So if you're a little bit worried about the coverage, I can definitely understand. But again, if you're going to play him outside linebacker or edge rusher, then the coverage stuff doesn't really matter. Jahad Campbell is 6'3", 244 pounds, and he looks every bit of it. But if this guy can potentially add 10 pounds to his frame, we'll be looking at a 6'3", 250 linebacker that can play edge, off-ball linebacker, outside linebacker. I just think his versatility gives him so much creativeness to add to whatever defense you want him to be. He's one of those players where it's like, man, if he can't work at outside linebacker, if he can't work at edge, stick him to off-ball linebacker, and vice versa. If he can't play off-ball linebacker, put him outside at edge and see what he can do. It's going to be somebody who needs a little bit of development, but I think within a few years, this guy could be one of the better players in the league, whether it's at off-ball linebacker or at edge rusher, outside linebacker. You get my point. Jahad Campbell to me is one of the biggest freaks in this class. He runs so well. He can shoot gaps. And I think when you do see him play edge, the very limited time you do see him play edge for Alabama, he puts on some really fun tape. So keep an eye out for Jahad Campbell. I could definitely see him rising after the combine. Moving on to number 6, I have Jahdae Barron of the Texas Longhorns. Now, for full transparency, you guys can see the Texas flag here. I am a UT fan, so keep that in mind as I'm going through this. But if Jahdae Barron had a Tulsa logo on his helmets, I think I'd still have him at number 6. Now, again, maybe there is an inherent bias with me in this one, but I do think a lot of people will agree with me on this one. Jahdae Barron is just such a solid player. Now, he's one of the older prospects in this one. I believe that he is a senior, so do keep that in mind that in terms of his future and what his ceiling might be, you're not really looking at somebody who has a Mike Green or Jalen Walker-like future where he needs a ton of development. Jahdae Barron is a guy who will step in right after the draft and will immediately be a plug-and-play starter, whether it's at nickel, outside corner, or even even safety. Jahdae Barron has prototypical size. I don't necessarily think size is an issue. Speed maybe leaves a little bit to be desired. I don't think he's going to run like a 4.3 or even a low 4.4. Hell, I think if he can run like a 4.48, I think that's going to be an excellent time for Jahdae Barron. But if he runs like a 4.5, maybe I drop him a few spots on this list. Jahdae Barron to me is just excellent in zone coverage. He's opportunistic with the ball in the air, sticky in man coverage, though I do think his long field speed could maybe hurt him a tad bit. I don't know if necessarily he's going to be a true cornerback one, but if you put him on a team that is in desperate need of improving their secondary that maybe already has a decent cornerback one, I think Jahdae Barron will make so much sense. Teams like the New York Jets, teams like the Carolina Panthers, the San Francisco 49ers, those type of teams that just need somebody who can be a versatile piece in the secondary, that's what Jahdae Barron can be. And I just think when you talk about guys who you know what you're going to be getting out of, Jahdae Barron is the guy. Like, I look at basically everybody on this list prior to Jahdae Barron, maybe outside of Malachi Starks, there is some level of question as to what you're actually going to get out of them because they need development and need time. Jahdae Barron is somebody who I know what I'm getting immediately when he gets drafted, so I don't have to worry about him potentially being a bust. I think Jahdae Barron has the potential to be an excellent player. I do question maybe his upside of being like an all-pro level player, which maybe is why I keep him at 6, but I think this guy will be an excellent, productive player throughout his entire career and will be on multiple great defenses out there in the NFL level. So I think Jahdae Barron is just a fun player that fits every single system and can play multiple positions. So I got Jahdae Barron at 6. Moving to number 5, I have Mike Green. Now, Mike Green is somebody who is absolutely flying up draft boards as of late because, man, this dude is just, he's kind of a bit of an unknown. Coming out of Marshall, not a lot of people are watching Marshall film, and that includes myself. I had no plans or expectations to be watching Marshall film, but the second that you turn on this guy's highlights, the tape, man, this dude is just an absolute blast to watch. 6'4", 248, so very similar size to guys like Jahad Campbell, Jalen Walker, even James Pierce Jr., a little bit bigger than those guys, and he does look like a prototypical edge rusher. Now, I do think that ideally adding 5 to 10 pounds would be something that you want to do. Getting around that 255 mark could be where he gets to. I think Mike Green is just a better player and better version of James Pierce Jr., where he has that speed rush maneuver that is just ridiculous, and he has the size as well, but I think he also has decent technique. He's also a younger player too. I think he's a redshirt sophomore, so you're getting somebody that still has time to develop, and his bend around the corner I think is very good. Unlike James Pierce Jr., I do think Mike Green has the bend and the ability to get to the pass rusher because of his overall bend, whereas with James Pierce Jr., you're not getting that same level of bend. Mike Green is flexible, he is athletic. I mean, he's just going to shoot up after the combine. Like, I think this guy's going to go from being a consensus first round pick to potentially a consensus top 15 pick after he goes out there and does well at the scouting combine. Again, I think technique wise, while it's good for college level, it is going to be something that needs much more improvement at the NFL level, but I do think this is somebody that can instantly step into your defensive line, and if you have somebody great next to him like a Max Crosby, or let's say Dallas takes Mike Green like a Micah Parsons, this is somebody that can instantly step in there, get you 6 to 8 sacks, and then as he develops, as he puts on more weight, and as he gets adjusted to the NFL game, I think he could be potentially a 10 sack a season type of guy. So I think Mike Green is great. I think his tape is excellent to watch. I suggest you guys watching it. If you don't know who Mike Green is, keep an eye out on him. He is flying off draft boards and potentially could be a top 15 pick. Moving to number 4, I got Will Johnson out of Michigan. Now, I'll be quick. I know you guys want to watch the video, but I'll get right back to it. I just want to let you guys know that I made a brand new YouTube channel called Metro Stories. It is a YouTube channel that is simply focused on telling stories of NFL players and NFL teams. So if that does interest you, go ahead and check the description below, as well as the pinned comment where you'll find a link for that channel. But let's get back into the video. Now, this is somebody who, as I talked about earlier, is one of those guys whose 2023 film is a lot better than his 2024 film. Because 2024, he was injured throughout the season and had a couple just bizarre plays here and there. He didn't have the greatest 2024 season, which is a bit concerning, but I also do think the entirety of Michigan kind of took a step back last year. So how much of that can you put on Will Johnson, and how much can you put on that on the new coaching staff, the new personnel around him? So yeah, do keep that in mind. With that said, Will Johnson, to me, if he is able to emulate his more 2023 tape at the NFL level, has prototypical size, he's sticky in coverage, his long field speed maybe leaves a little bit to be desired. Like, I kind of think he's similar to Jahdae Barron, where he has enough speed to where he can handle it, but if he's one-on-one on an island with Tyreek Hill, I don't necessarily know if that's really a great matchup for him. With that said, how often is he going to be lined up in press man coverage versus Tyreek Hill with no safety over the top? Probably 0 times, and if he does, that is just a stupid play by the defensive coordinator. I think Will Johnson has the prototypical size that maybe Jahdae Barron doesn't quite have. Like, Jade's around 6'6", 6 foot 5'11" ish, something along those lines. Will Johnson's around 6'2", 200 plus pounds, and he looks every bit of it. He's long, he's lengthy, he can be a playmaker. We saw the pick 6 this year that helped Michigan win a game. I think Will Johnson's a hell of a player, but again, that 2024 film was not as clean as the 2023 film, because 2023, honestly, it got a little boring because he was just making every single play and was just locking up defenders. And then 2024, it was like, oh wow, he's kind of getting attacked here a little bit, he's getting exposed, and then oh, he'll make a very beautiful play, or oh, he'll get a pick 6. But man, if he could be that 2023 version of himself, he can be a true cornerback 1 in the NFL. And if you pair him alongside a good cornerback 2, I think this dude will be fantastic in the NFL for many years to come. So yeah, I got Will Johnson at 4. Moving to number 3, I have Mason Graham, my number 1 interior defensive lineman in this year's draft class. This is somebody who maybe is getting a little bit of prospect fatigue, because I have seen some people just nitpicking the hell out of this guy. Oh, he's got smaller arms. Oh, he's not the ideal size. Man, this dude just absolutely plays at such an elite level. He is one of the most physical players in this year's draft class, without a doubt. Like, he may be a smidge undersized for that interior defensive line position, but he makes up for it with his aggressiveness, with his pursuit, with just his intensity. And even honestly, truth be told, even though he is a little bit undersized, I don't think he's incredibly undersized. Like, I think he still has very good size. He has a good frame, good technique. So I have no issue with Mason Graham in terms of his physical look. What makes Mason Graham, in my opinion, one of the best players in this year's draft class is I just think he's the safest player out there. And when I say safest, I mean, I think this guy is going to step in there, be a full-time starter immediately, and at his worst is going to be a good starter, but at his best could be an all-pro level player, which is just what makes me love Mason Graham so much, because he is just such a safe and almost certain pick. He will step in there day one, be an excellent run stuffer, and if he can develop a tad bit, I think he could be somebody that gets you close to 8 sacks a season. He has the fluidity, he's a freak athlete, he's got the size, and because he's a little bit undersized as an interior defensive lineman, he's a little bit faster, a little bit leaner, and maybe a little bit more difficult for those big sturdy guards that can't quite move as well to get a grip on Mason Graham. I do think Mason Graham will be able to take advantage of poor guard play. So I think Mason Graham, to me, is just such a safe and fun prospect that whatever team does take him, their defense will get better. And what's fun is you look at all the top teams in the draft class that could use interior defensive line. A lot of them already have good play out of that position, or at least one really good player. For example, the Jets, who are a team that have been sometimes mocked to take him, already have Quinnen Williams. So if you compare Quinnen Williams to Mason Graham, my God, or potentially the Carolina Panthers, I would suppose they'd have to trade up, but they already have Derek Brown. You pair Derek Brown with a Mason Graham, and that's just disgusting. Raiders with Christian Wilkins. So, I mean, so many other players, like even the New England Patriots with Christian Barmore. Like, a lot of these teams already have one good interior defensive lineman, but if you pair them with Mason Graham, like, I just think it's going to be a nasty for whatever team does take him. I think Mason Graham's a heck of a player, so I got him at number 3. Number 2, I have Travis Hunter. Now, Travis Hunter is a risky player to put on this, quite honestly, because he could very well play wide receiver at the NFL level, but I do think to some extent he will play outside corner very much in the league. I think Travis Hunter is the best quarterback in this draft class. I think he is the best overall athlete. I think his coverage skills are extremely underrated. I've seen some people say that he's just an average receiver and an average corner. They could not be further from the truth. This guy is the real deal. He is a fantastic wide receiver. I'd have him just as a pure receiver, probably as my wide receiver 2, ahead of Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, and Matthew Golden. He'd only be behind Ted McMillan. And when it comes to corner, I would put him in front of Will Johnson, because Will Johnson's 2024 tape is not as good. Now, granted, if Will Johnson just repeated his 2023 tape in 2024, Will Johnson would be my cornerback 1, but I have to knock him down a few spots because 2024 did happen and it wasn't as pretty. Travis Hunter, to me, man, I mean, this guy is just such a fun player to watch. A little bit undersized, like he is a little bit on the lengthy side or a lanky side, which is okay, especially at the corner position. But when it comes to him playing press man coverage against bigger receivers, I just don't see that ending very well. But again, with a good defensive coordinator, that will likely not happen too much. And even when he is in those press man coverage situations, I do think that he has the speed, the overall size, the length, and just the ability to keep up with many of those top receivers. Travis Hunter, to me, is somebody who I do think will fit in at corner at the NFL level by whatever team does take him. And I do think we'll be splitting time by also playing some snaps on the offensive end as well. How many NFL players have we ever been able to have a conversation about him being somebody that can play on both sides of the field? And the answer is, I don't know, maybe none. Maybe like Champ Bailey, I know, had some conversation there for a little bit, but man, Travis Hunter, to me, his tape speaks for itself. Just go out there, watch the guy's highlights. It kind of tells you the full story worry of just how freaky of an athlete this guy truly is. I will say he has a lot of tread on the tires because he's played both sides for Colorado for the past 2 years and also did a lot of that at Jackson State. So this is somebody who is not necessarily a spring chicken. He's not necessarily somebody who's going to be stepping in day one and doesn't have any tread on his tires so he can play for the next 15 years. I do think that he is somebody who I'm looking at his career and probably saying, yeah, maybe 10 years at most, if he can stay in top tier shape. With his size, with his length, I do think he's going to be an excellent player. But again, I do a little bit worry about the tread that's already on his tires, but we'll have to wait to see if that does impact him 5 years down the line. As it goes for right now, I think I'm getting a fantastic player that can play multiple positions, sticky in coverage, fluid hips, freaky athlete, long, lengthy. Travis Hunter's at number 2. But at number 1, I have Abdul Carter out of Penn State. For a lot of players, or for a lot of analysts, Abdul Carter is their best prospect in this year's draft class. Now, he would not be my number 1 because I would have Travis Hunter as my best pure prospect in the draft class. But as a defensive player, I would have Abdul Carter at number 1. Hopefully that makes some sense. Abdul Carter to me, man, I mean, he is Jalen Walker, Jahad Campbell, and Mike Green put into one player. He is somebody who is a freak athlete with great lower body flexibility. His bend is just maybe the best in this year's draft class, which to me just makes it that much better. He's also somebody that can play off-ball linebacker. So again, if he doesn't work out at edge, which he probably will because he's 6'3", 259 and runs like Jalen Walker, but if he doesn't work at edge, put him at off-ball linebacker where he actually played last year. So if he doesn't work out at edge, stick him at off-ball linebacker, and I do think this guy could be fantastic at off-ball linebacker. There is reasons why he's getting compared to Micah Parsons because Penn State, number 11, but even beyond that, they're built kind of similar to one another coming out of college. Hell, they kind of even look like each other in some ways, but they play like each other more so. Used to play off-ball linebacker, switched over to edge. Now, Abdul did it in college. Micah did it in the NFL. I would venture to say it's a bit more impressive what Micah did, but maybe I'm just a little bit biased by my Dallas love. So, I mean, but Abdul Carter, man, he's got the technique. I do think as time goes on, he'll become an even better player when he learns more pass rush moves and can really refine his game. But I mean, you're getting somebody that's going to step into your defense day one and instantly be one of the best players in your defense, and as time goes on probably will be your best defensive player. I think he is just such a high ceiling player, and I don't think his floor is that low. I do think Mason Graham has a higher floor where it's like, I know Mason Graham's going to be great. Abdul Carter could be good to not great, worst case scenario, but I think best case scenario, you're talking about one of the best players in the NFL. So Abdul Carter, man, I just love his tape. I love his film. Complete riser these past few months. I mean, his playoffs was great. He's just dominant. He just moves people around, and 6'3", 259. You just don't find those type of guys that can move that well too often. But hey, Penn State's done it twice, so we'll see if they can do it for a third time. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, do you agree or disagree with my top 10 defensive players in the 2025 NFL Draft? And if you do disagree, let me know in the comment section below with your top 10. But hopefully you guys did enjoy. Hit the subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.